Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. I like to talk about American presidents, and in doing that, I show the through line between uh, our, our liberties and, of course, the uh, institutions that protect our liberties through our, studying, observing U.S. history. Um, I've been also talking about the deprivation of rights that I've been experiencing in Montgomery County Circuit Court, superintended by a corrupt judge, James Bonifant of Montgomery County Circuit Court, Maryland. And, so of course, so which is, violated my 14th Amendment rights. I've done videos talking about what the 14th Amendment is. Of course, that protects my due process of law, that no state shall deprive me of my life, liberty, or property without, due process of law. And last clause in Section 1 talks about equal protection of the laws. So it says that nor shall any state deny me, uh, of due process of equal, sorry, nor shall any state deny me of the equal protection of the laws. And basically saying that I can't be targeted by a state actor, by the government. You can't single me out, just target me arbitrarily for prosecution or persecution. And so I've been suffering a malicious prosecution in Montgomery County, Maryland. And it's the violation of federal statutes. That's 18 USC section 241 and section 242 and 42 USC section 1983, and that's a malicious prosecution. So, the charges against me are that police officers who, did not have an arrest warrant, right, in my home, and they came on a swatting hoax, actually a violation of a federal statute as well. I think it's 18 USC section 1030 and 1038 and section 875. There's so many of these sections, but, it's a federal crime to make a false threat call, a false threat call of somebody, of a hostage situation, and that's what happened in my case. The police was the one who that engineered it. The police and rogue agents of the Navy that were under investigation, right? Uh, and so they did it in order, in retaliation, in violation of a Whistleblower Protection Act. But I'm not going to get into that because the Montgomery County criminal justice system has been co-opted, and it's Judge James Bonifant who's been superintending like a King James Bonifant, superintending in violating my rights in this whole process. So today I want to talk about procedural unfairness perpetrated by Judge James Bonifant. And of course, it's particularly odious considering that the role of the judge, of the judiciary, is to protect our, constitutional rights, protect the liberties of Americans against government overreach. Um, so you see those Bill of Rights that um, I've discussed. It's the courts that, through their opinions and court cases that, you know uh, protect the liberties of Americans, individuals, against the encroachment or interference of the government, right? Prevents the government from violating the rights of Americans, and that's in the Bill of Rights. Because again, I mentioned how the courts are sort of almost the weakest um, organ of government because they don't have an army, they don't have a police force. Um, it's their reputation and the veneration that Americans have for our judges, our justices, our judicial process that's their currency. That's what they have. That's their power. That's their authority. The fact that we revere them, that they do the right things, and they're impartial. So, but we have a judge now that's actually partial. I'm trained in the law. I'm a lawyer. Again, I've talked about how a lawyer is different from an attorney. An attorney is licensed to represent clients in courts because they have a law license. They've taken the bar, passed the bar, the officers of the court, and they represent clients in court. I'm a lawyer. I have a Juris Doctor degree. So I'm trained as a lawyer, but I've not taken the bar. I don't represent clients. But, I've actually worked in law firms. I've worked in the law. In fact, part of what I was doing legal research, doing things like that for the federal government, in addition to being an auditor, an accountant. So, I do a variety of things. And I've done it in different corporations, companies as well. And I have a Juris Doctor from George Washington University Law School. A Juris Doctor means somebody, a teacher of legal knowledge, right? Someone who's a teacher of the law, right? So I use that opportunity, the opportunity that I have from my training, and to sort of help others. And this does not constitute legal advice. So that's my disclaimer. But just to sort of help others, considering that what I'm going through, others go through it as well. And I'm very fortunate for people who've paid attention, because remember what happened during the Nazi era. It's sort of like uh, flippant when glib when people just refer to the current era in America, likening it to the Nazi era in Germany. Um, but you never know what I'm experiencing. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody in America as well. I'm an American citizen. I'm trained in the law. I was working for the federal government when I was assaulted in my own home by the police, and my due process of the law, my due process was violated. So as Martin Niemöller, had said, he was a German Lutheran theologian, and he has this famous quote of the Nazi era. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So it can happen to you, right? As it is said, justice anywhere, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. So my rights have been violated, they've been threatened, and so I'm going to discuss how that's happened. And it's particularly odious considering, the foundation of our nation. Amongst the grievances, why a central grievance, why we went to war against Great Britain to get our independence. As Thomas Jefferson, who was a lawyer himself, he stated that the king had obstructed the administration of justice. He'd set up mock trials. So he was complaining about the violation of due process, right? And this is what Judge Bonifant has done. He's a judge supposed to be protecting my due process, but he's the one who's been violating it. He's actually coerced my attorneys to commit misconduct, right? He's been trying to, he's not partial. He's not impartial. He's been a very partial judge. He's shown his preference, his favor to protect the rogue cops, the rogue cops who filed false charges against me. The police came to my home without an arrest warrant, nothing, and they assaulted me. They falsely imprisoned me, and then they tased me, shot at me, and then they claim no, I was the one who assaulted them because that's what the charges are. These malicious prosecution. It's predicated on uh, false claims by the three officers who tased me that I assaulted them, second degree assault in my home, right? And so I'm trying to show the procedural unfairness because till date, it's 3 years now. We have no arrest warrant. We have not been able to obtain the arrest or search warrant that authorized the police to come to my home. So my attorneys have said no, they didn't have an arrest warrant. So initially, the charge statement said the reason why they came was because of an emergency evaluation petition filed by my uncle, Jide Iwari, that I threatened to shoot him. That's why they came. They came to execute it. I was never given notice, right? So under the law, if you're going to, because an emergency evaluation petition is an ex parte order, it's somebody who goes, and they file, they get what's called an ex parte order. Ex parte order, they're fundamentally violations of 14th Amendment due process of law, right? They fundamentally violate that because 14th Amendment, protects your due process and equal protection. So if there's any, you can't take away my life, my liberty, or my property without due process of the law. So due process of the law in terms of emergency evaluation petition or any accusation against me is that it pivots back to the Sixth Amendment. That if I'm accused of something, I'm to be notified of the charges, right? I'm supposed to know my charges, and I have a right to dispute it. I'm supposed to have a hearing, appear in court, dispute it that these charges are fraudulent. And then three, at the hearing, I have an impartial judge. There's an impartial tribunal. All of those elements were violated. They've always been violated. And Judge Bonifant has been perpetrating this injustice against me. So now the trial is actually in 2 days' time, right? And I don't have an attorney. I have another video talking about how Judge Bonifant, infringed on my absolute right to effective counsel because he's been trying to coerce my attorney to suppress evidence, right? To exclude evidence, to prevent me from talking, and to coerce me uh, into taking an unfavorable plea bargain, which I've refused. It's 3 years now. So you see the procedural unfairness that Judge Bonifant has been perpetrating in this whole malicious prosecution. It's a it's a malicious prosecution and not just a futile prosecution. My attorneys have made it made a claim in court that this is a futile prosecution, right? Judge Bonifant had the authority to dismiss this case because he's the only one who's been superintending the case all the while, the past 3 years now. He's monopolized it. A futile prosecution is when the prosecution, the state files a case that it's impossible for it to win. It has no way to win or it doesn't have evidence to prove its case. It can't because the standard for a criminal case, right, for conviction is the state has to provide evidence to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime to be able to get a conviction. They still haven't provided evidence of the crime. They can't get a conviction. It's impossible because we have defenses. It can't get a conviction. It's impossible. So it's a futile prosecution. But it's malicious because they actually filed the charges in a cynical manner. And objective is to prevent me from lawsuits against the police brutality that happened in my home. They injured me, they shot at me, they almost killed me, they dehumanized me, they removed me naked. That's a sexual assault and dumped me in a public place and fabricated evidence. My attorney, so Judge Bonifant, has been trying to get and the states have been trying to get my attorney to exclude this evidence of the illegal conduct of the police. My attorney actually told me that, well, Montgomery, the jury, how they have a favorable opinion of the police, and if I'm presenting evidence that puts the police in a negative light, that they will not be happy, they won't support it. Then you're telling me that we're going to have a biased jury because the Sixth Amendment says I'm entitled to an impartial jury. Then file a venue change. She didn't do that, right? My attorney didn't do that. Failed to do that. I filed a venue change myself after she was struck as my attorney. She was removed as my attorney. And I have no attorney right now, so I filed a venue change. But Judge James Bonifant, whom I have a misconduct complaint against till date, he is the one who heard it, who reviewed it, and he denied it. Again, that violates the principle, the legal principle of natural justice that says nemo. It's the Latin. That means, again, I took the time to be learning Latin. Nemo, uh, nemo, judex in causa sua. Right. That means no one should be a judge in a cause, and it's against. It's supposed to bar conflict of interest, right? Conflict of interest. Judge Bonifant has a conflict of interest, right? The hospital that he's on the board of, that's MedStar Hospital, that fabricated a false report for the police and gave it to the police in violation of my constitutional rights. I have a malpractice complaint against them already. So he should have made that known. He never exposed that. He admitted it, but he just said, well, again, he violated that principle because I'd filed a motion for him to recuse himself because of his conflict of interest. He admitted that he didn't disclose that he forgot, blah, blah, blah. In court, he was the one hearing it himself. I think this was September 30th, 2024. And he decided it, and he denied it. He said, no, I forgot. He just rambled. It was evasive. He rambled, evasive, garbled information, right? And he denied it. And he just said, oh, he's not biased, even though he has a conflict of interest. So those are, they're fundamental, they're signs of procedural unfairness, because it violates my due process of law and the impartiality of the operation of the courts. I have a judge who's partial. He's shown clear bias for the police. His demeanor towards me is abusive. He yells at me in court. He disparages me in court. At one time, he was calling me that I have bipolar disorder. He was shouting, and it was that day. On that day, was funny because there were people around. It was a large courtroom on that day, and he just started shouting. And he doesn't let me talk because for a long time, he claimed my attorney said I shouldn't talk. So the attorney, I had a nominal attorney, Steve Mercer, hired by Jide Warere, and that guy made misrepresentations that I was delusional and I didn't know what was going on. And so the judge shouldn't let me talk, and the judge would just start yelling in court, abusive, disparaging me, saying that you have bipolar disorder. Why don't you want to take your medication? You have bipolar disorder, all a lie. So he was intentionally fabricating information maliciously in court. I'm going to do a video explaining his motive, apart from the fact that he has a personal interest, financial interest in this. So there's a conflict of interest. He's abusing his office, but there's another motive as well. So he was disparaging me. Those are instances of judicial misconduct and procedural unfairness. He's not supposed to. The judge is supposed to demonstrate judicial temperament and respect the dignity, the rights of even the accused in court. I still have my, there's still rights that I have, but he abuses me. And then the thing is, he violates another principle. He's stating that, oh, I have bipolar disorder, not letting me respond. I said, no, that's inaccurate, right? So that's he's because he doesn't let me affirm that no, I don't have bipolar disorder. I'm not ill, so that's why I'm not taking any medication that you're asking me, this nostrum for a false thing. This is actually defamatory information that you're stating, right? And eventually he committed libel. I've done videos in which eventually on February 2nd, so he's reversed what he said. He now said, well, I do not have mental illness. That the psychiatrist said I don't have a mental illness. But he was now threatening me again because when I, fired my attorney who was being co-opted, who was selling out my case to the state attorney and to the judge was, trying to coerce her and so she basically was negligent. She refused to present. She refused to present evidence and file motions to dismiss for malicious prosecution. She didn't do any of those things, and she's trying to hide evidence, right? That demonstrates that this is a malicious prosecution, if not a futile prosecution, and that the case should be dismissed, right? So he turned out saying, well, that I don't have a mental illness. So that's fraud upon the court. He's been perpetrating fraud upon the court. That's another reason to dismiss the case. He hasn't done that, right? He hasn't done that at all. And so another instance of procedural unfairness is, as I said, that was not, so there was another instance. I did a video and talked about how on February the 14th, my public defender deceived me that I was appearing for a bond review to be allowed to go to work because I'd been under house arrest. I had a GPS on me, and I had a job offer at the Pentagon, six-figure job offer at the Pentagon. Excellent job, right? Um, and this guy is a subject matter expert. Excellent job. For me, it was like a dream job. Would have, military intelligence programs, right? But this guy, so that was what I was deceived because I was in another jurisdiction. I was living in DC. So she deceived me that I was coming, right, for that, for a bond review so I can be allowed to go to work. She didn't show me the results of a second psychological evaluation, right? That was done by a Dr. Michael Mintz, who fabricated everything, his whole report. My mother, my brother, they were present, right? My friends, I provided my friends. My friends gave information to interview them. And my friends have now said, but he lied, he fabricated, in fact, perjury, because it's a document that's going through the courts, was malicious, was libel. She didn't let me see it because she knew the guy had lied. That's what they paid the psychologist for, because they wanted me to go and do an evaluation of my own. I said I'm not going to do one. But when somebody had done it, we eventually, if I have my psychiatrist, if I get somebody, my aunt is a psychiatrist, she'd given him an examination saying, no, I have no mental illness. She's not observed anything. I have no history. The judge refused it, saying, well, she's my family, and so even though the HIPAA law says I can have anybody, right? I'm not making an insanity defense. I'm not using that. If the state is spending all their time to demonstrate that, well, I have a mental illness that I didn't know of, because that's what the charge statement said, that I had an undiagnosed thought disorder, then what happens is they can never win their case. Right. So now I've challenged it. My family challenged it, and we've demonstrated now that no, I don't have a thought disorder. So they've just defamed me. Right. That's defamatory. So that's from the hospital. They told me, hey, you have a lawsuit against the state. The public defender told me, man, if they take you anywhere, because my public defender was telling the judge that this guy doesn't have a mental illness. But in this instance, on February 14th, the public defender invited me on the pretext that I was actually coming for a bond review. Now, she had me do an evaluation with somebody the public defender supplied. He was supposed to be private, right? Because I was going to get a private psychiatrist. My aunt said, okay, my family, they said, okay, we'll get you a private psychiatrist who'll do it, right? No trouble. Challenge this rubbish that this Julie Smith had. Her name's Dr. Julie Smith. She's a part of a racket. She falsifies um, evaluation reports on behalf of Montgomery County. They have a health Medicaid racket fraud that they commit in. She's part of a Medicaid fraud in Montgomery County. So, Maryland, they defraud the United States government. So, Judge Bonifant is part of that ring, and it's part of what the federal government should investigate. But in any event, and this is not defamation or libel because defamation or libel is when something is untrue, right? I'm an auditor. I know, right? It's been demonstrated that Judge Bonifant maliciously falsified records, right, and got people entered into a conspiracy with people to falsify my records to wrongfully involuntarily commit me, only for those psychiatrists to say, no, this guy doesn't belong here. He doesn't have a mental illness, right? So at least that was what some positive that came out of that, right? But it violated my constitutional rights. So the public defender now lets me know on this day, February 14th. She now reads me. She said, oh, she got the report. Well, if she got the report, why didn't she send it to me? Apparently, she had the report for about a month. She never gave it to me, right? So that's ineffectiveness of counsel, negligence in the performance of her duties, and the breach. She got it and she didn't give it to me. Instead, she didn't share it with me. And she knew what my objective was. I needed a psychiatrist, an evaluator to dispute the false report that this state psychologist had done. Psychologist, the hack doing the bidding of Judge James Bonifant, Dr. Julie Smith. So she didn't let me know. So that was a breach of loyalty. It's actually attorney misconduct. It's a breach of loyalty. She didn't let me know. She didn't inform me. She didn't advise me that, okay, this report was out and she'd received it. Now, on the other hand, the psychologist violated. There was a breach of contract because we had an agreement that he would give it to me first. I have to be the one. I have to review it before I give consent to Desiree Hall to share it. Right? Desiree Hall has to seek my permission first. She breached that. She breached it. Instead, she went to go and share it with the state and the judge. And I was the last person to know on February 14th that this quack doctor, psychologist, Dr. Michael Mintz, who had an interview with my mother and my brother present, and they recorded it, and he stated in that interview that no, he doesn't see any sign of a mental illness. And my mom told him I don't have a mental illness. He had gone to fabricate a report saying I was dangerous, and then he had to put me in a psychiatric hospital immediately. And so the judge committed me. On that day, in February 14th, I didn't know. He just said he didn't let me talk. So he coerced my counsel to commit misconduct because that was a breach of loyalty, and it was a breach of attorney-client privilege, right? Because it was something she and I, in the contract that I signed, the consent form, I wrote that I'm the one I have to review the report first and give her consent to share it with anybody because, I didn't give my consent. So, that's attorney malpractice. And Judge Bonifant was one who coerced her to do that because he was on, when she just came, he's always sidebarring with them. There's something called sidebar where the judge can call the attorney over, and then they start to talk and the mic is off. So you can't hear them because there's just this noise, right? Static in the air to mute what they're saying so nobody else can hear. So it got into a plan to trick me, right? To trick me, and they would he would order a wrongful involuntary commitment using falsified information from this Dr. Michael Mintz. So that's procedural unfairness because if he was going to commit me, I needed to get notice. So on that day, he gives me notice, but I have a right to dispute it at a hearing. I had no hearing. My family had a right to dispute it, to get a hearing, because it's a privacy matter, right? Your mental health, your health records, your things that have to do with your, your health, medical records, those are privacy. Those are protected within your privacy rights, your zone of privacy rights. and they can't be violated. The state can't take away that because each individual has his own agency. That's our state. We're not Russia. We're not the Soviet Union. That's what they used to do in Soviet Union, and that's basically what this judge has been doing. He calls me rigid. So he was trying to assert that my refusal to accept the state's plea bargain offer meant I was rigid, and he believes being rigid is a mental illness, is a sign of a mental illness. Um, that's delusional, right? If he has a mental illness, then he is no longer fit to be a judge. He has a severe disability, right? So, but in any event, it's not a mental being rigid. That's protected in the First Amendment. I've stated this before because we have the freedom of our thoughts, our conscience, our opinions, and of course our religion. And that means we're self-governing, right? And we have our own agency. It's not like the Stalinist Soviet Union used to do. If you had a different opinion from that of the state, right, which is what is happening now, right? The state wants to coerce me to take a plea bargain. They filed false charges against me and they want me to say I'm guilty without a trial. And I said, no, that's not going to happen, right? So the state has the Soviet Union under Stalin. If there was a dissident who didn't accept state propaganda, they would say he was mentally ill. They'd institutionalize them. They put them in a psychiatric hospital, and they'll just force treatment. They'll say that their refusal of state propaganda meant they had a mental illness, and they had to treat it, and so they'll keep force treating them until they accept state propaganda. And that's what Judge James Bonifant, just like the Nazis, just like the Soviet authoritarians, that's what Judge James Bonifant is trying to perpetrate in Montgomery County, Maryland. So those are aspects of procedural unfairness. I'm going to do another video and talk more about his coercion of my attorneys, right? Violating my Sixth Amendment right to my right to effective assistance of counsel, effective assistance of counsel, right? So he's violating that right. That's a deprivation of rights to the have assistance of counsel. So he's deprived that right. I'm going to do another video. This has gotten long, and I'll try and keep this short. So, so these are ways and sometimes judges can make a mistake. Maybe he really thinks that, well, this person has a mental illness and he's trying to protect the public or protect them. But this is not a mistake because it's been 3 years, right? It's been 3 years, and he's been consistent. He's been persistent. He threatened me again on February the 2nd. He threatened me. The state threatened me again when my attorney, who was trying to hide evidence, I've had 1 week to trial. I'd given her a subpoenas list. She didn't subpoena anybody, right? No subpoena. So nobody to come and talk on my behalf. She wants to exclude witnesses, the people who made the false allegations, Jide Wari, whom I have a right to cross-examine, who's recanted his statement, who my mom already went to court against in Nigeria. She wants to exclude him. She wants to exclude the Germa Shumi, whom both of them, the state filed charges against them. I have evidence. I went to court. I spoke before a judge. The judge said, because he went to go and file a fraudulent peace order, the judge said, okay, hey, you have time. Because my attorney then had refused to challenge the peace order. It was an ex parte order. They just took me, kidnapped me under color of law, saying it was my family. In fact, they didn't tell me what was going on. They shot me. I didn't know why. I'd been deceived that it was all part of a training exercise by the Department of the Navy. So I didn't know what was going on. Nobody told me what I'd done. And later on, after I'd been released, from when I was arrested and I was in jail, that was when I saw the false accusations. They just fabricated everything, right? Fabrications. They fabricated that I was attacking my neighbors with a knife, that I wanted to. Another one, they said I made a bomb threat. They made all sorts of lies, told all sorts of lies, right? And I haven't had a chance to talk. So another aspect of procedural of unfairness is where Judge Bonifant, for about a year, he didn't let me speak in my defense, and my attorney did not contend with his statement, saying, "Well, I'll get to speak at trial, right? Don't worry." So when he was saying things like, "I called my home a military base," my attorney didn't dispute it. He didn't let me say, "No, I've never called my home a military base. That's lies." Because that's what GD wrote in the fabricated emergency evaluation petition. When he was saying that I threatened to shoot police, I've never threatened to shoot anybody. My attorney didn't let me dispute it. So he was fabricating things, right? And again, that violates, the principle of natural justice. And that principle is uh, Audi, Audi alteram partem, right? The right to be heard. And my attorney was silent. So that's the attorney misconduct. And so my attorney was selling out, his loyalty to me to a corrupt judge, James Bonifant, and to the state. He was silent. He was silent. He was silent every time Judge Bonifant made these false assertions in court, discrediting me. Uh, it was silent. So saying, "Well, we'll get to say it in at a trial," but a week to trial, my attorney is now saying that, "Well, let's hide this evidence. Let's not include any of this. Let's not challenge all the lies. Let's not present any of that evidence at a court." And she never filed. At one time, she said she was going to file because she now had proof that the emergency evaluation petition was a fabrication. She now had proof that the peace order was a fabrication, right? She didn't file a motion to suppress, right, all evidence. This was fruit of the poisonous tree. She had told me that was what she was going to do. She told me that because we had a time for motions hearing, and she had initially made representations to me that she was going to file a motion to suppress evidence because they're fabrications, because they were an illegal search, they're fabrications, and so they were inadmissible in court. So, and she said because the state would have any evidence, the case is going to be dismissed. I agreed with that. I said, fine, no trouble. Then she decided later on, when it was now time, she said, well, she's not going to do that. She's just, that she's not going to do that. She's going to get a judgment of acquittal in court, that she's going to talk to the state attorney to dismiss the case because they can't win their case. It's, if not a malicious prosecution, it's a futile prosecution because they don't have any evidence to convict, even though she should have filed a motion to dismiss based on malicious prosecution, but she didn't. And the judge has been seeing all the while because there was an attorney, Steve Mercer, said it. He said it in court in July 2023. He said, look, you can never get a conviction against this man based on the facts, no evidence. October 26, 2023, he was still asking, he said, hey, he doesn't see any assault. The only person who's been assaulted is me. Where's the bill of particulars? State what type of assault you're talking. What do you mean by assault? He wants to understand. Till today, till February the 2nd, when she was fired as my attorney, February the 2nd, 2026, my attorney had not requested or obtained a bill of particulars, and she had not brought it to the attention of the judge because the judge should have dismissed it typically and say, hey, you know what, you don't have sufficient evidence. This is at least a futile prosecution because it's a waste of taxpayers' limited resources, and it's just a burden on the litigation is just a burden on the defendant, right? Who's an innocent man. You have to let him can't move on with his life. It's 3 years. Judge Bonifant has not done any of this, so that's part of his procedural unfairness. So he's shown a consistent bias for the police who violated my rights, didn't have an arrest warrant. It was an illegal raid, illegal search. They orchestrated and engineered the swatting, right? They engineered the swatting. They originated it, orchestrated it, right? And executed it, right? To violate my constitutional rights, brutalized me. But Judge Bonifant said what they did was excellent policing because I'm alive, right? I was supposed to be alive. I'm supposed to be alive because I was in my home. I was not outside committing any crime. There was no one in my home that I was holding hostage. I was alone and I was not trying to kill myself. But they my attorney wants me to hide all that evidence, the evidence of the false certification by the crooked doctors Guru Ghaffari at Suburban Hospital in Barton Leonard, where they falsified reports lying that I wanted to kill myself and kill people. Those are defamatory, right? It's libelous. I've already filed a medical malpractice complaint against them, and just wants to, suppressing evidence. And those are ethical lapses, egregious misconduct that Judge Bonifant and he's also coerced the office of the public defender to perpetrate. So now I'm seeing in practice, at least in Montgomery County, I don't know what happens in other places. The office of the public defender is co-opted by the state attorney and a crooked judge, a corrupt judge like Judge James Bonifant. So that's what they do. They sabotage the case of the defendant. My name is Olurotimi Osha. Let me stop this video here and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.